Something feels off. No, not quite. That feels better. I'm gonna rank every coaster and give them a review. Every drop and every hill, every launch and every loop. Rate it 1 to 10 and then we'll do it all again. Gonna rank and review every coaster. What's going on, everybody? My name is Mario. This is a channel all about amusement park type stuff, but mostly coasters. And today, in my never-ending journey to rank and review every coaster I have ever been on, we're going to be talking about Incredicoaster. But real quick, I just wanted to say thank you to all of my subscribers, and to anybody that's not subscribed, you better subscribe, because if you do, you'll be a superhero. Like me. But without any further ado, let's review. So Incredicoaster is of course located at Disney's California Adventure, and Incredicoaster used to be known as California Screamin', and while I have ridden this coaster as both Incredicoaster and California Screamin', for time and simplicity, I'm mostly just going to be talking about it as Incredicoaster, with some minor comparisons here and there. Now to start us off with some stats, Incredicoaster has a height of 121 feet, a top speed of 55 miles per hour, one no longer Mickey Mouse themed inversion, an incredibly long length of 6,072 feet, which contributes to a very long ride duration of almost a minute and a half. Now that ride duration is from the first launch until the final brake run, and there is still theming after the final brake run, so you could say this ride is a little bit longer, but regardless, it's a very long ride, and that's one of the reasons that I really like this coaster. I think it is just a fun, decently themed, long, enjoyable ride. But to talk a little bit more of that ride experience, let's talk about some of the off-ride aspects. This ride is located in the back of the park in the relatively new area known as Pixar Pier, and aside from the wheel, it's just about the centerpiece of that area. And aside from the fact that it looks good in that area, I think this ride looks fantastic altogether. I don't know that I'm the biggest fan about the red tube. I did kind of like it better as blue, but I still absolutely adore the support style. I think the sort of classic wooden boardwalk style that they were going for this coaster originally still holds true, and I think it looks absolutely fantastic. Now, before getting on this ride, there's almost always a sizable line, but of course, being at a Disney park, you do have the fast pass option, and if you do get in the standby wait, you won't be waiting too long, because this thing runs, I think, 7 trains or so. Its capacity is just off the charts. So it is a quick moving line if you do have to stand in the standby wait. But it's also fun to watch because it has so many trains going on it, which also just really adds to the area feeling that much more alive and vibrant. But I think I've talked enough about the off-ride stuff, so let's hop on the ride and go through the layout. Now, I don't really have any footage of this ride, but my buddy Drew from Parks Bros was kind enough to let me use his 360 POV of this. So, you're going to see a lot of Drew's face in this. So definitely go check out his channel. I'll link the video and his channel below. But yeah, let's go through the layout. So right off the bat, straight out of the station, you get some decent theming on your right side, with Edna taking care of Jack. And honestly, the story of the theming on this ride kind of gets lost on me, but visually, I think it's pretty decent, and it's definitely better to have something to look at over nothing to look at. I think a lot of people were slightly disappointed with the caliber of theming on this ride, but it's also a fast-paced roller coaster, so having advanced animatronics that you're going to see as you're flying past them at 30 to 55 miles per hour wouldn't really make much sense. So you turn past that theming, and you sit on the launch track, and then you get a nice countdown as the anticipation builds, and then you're off on your way. There's a nice water effect that goes off on the side of you as you're progressing down the launch track, which is really cool. And this is also where the score and onboard music really starts to pick up. Now, there's plenty of people that rightfully so much preferred the California Screamin' soundtrack, and while that soundtrack was amazing, I think the Incredicoaster soundtrack is amazing as well. I think as far as onboard audio goes, it's pretty top notch, and you also do have characters interjecting throughout the ride as well, which does add to the story, although like I said, the story is one that I don't really remember. So after that launch track, you head up into the first themed tunnel where you have Jack shooting lasers out of his eyeballs. And this tunnel looks really cool. Definitely looks cooler at night, and that's the case for pretty much the entirety of the ride. Every aspect of this ride is significantly better at night, especially the tunnels. So at the top of that first hill, if you're on the front or towards the front, you're going to get a nice pop of airtime. Every other row, mild floater at best. But this ride really isn't about intense forces, it's more about the theming and just having a long, fun, enjoyable ride. You do a bit of a swooping drop out of that tunnel, pull up, and you hit the first set of block breaks. That's going to be a very common theme with this ride because having 7 trains on a roller coaster obviously requires a lot of brake runs. Now on a lot of other coasters this might bother me, but it goes through them pretty quickly at least, and it's more than excusable. I'd much rather not have to wait 3 hours for this ride. So you cruise right through those breaks, make a couple of twisty turns downward, and then that's when you get taken into the second sort of launch, sort of lift. It's not a chain lift, it is using LIMs, but it's definitely not fast either. This is also where you enter the second themed tunnel, which is probably my least favorite. You have a stretched out Mrs. Incredible and Jack in some sort of ice blob thing. Honestly, I don't know what the hell's happening with that. And then after you pass her and start to crest down the drop, you have Mr. Incredible trying to bribe Jack with a cookie, and going down that drop in the back, you get some decent airtime. Middle and front, really not too much to offer. After that, we have some more long banked turns. And as you can see in this POV, you have another train flying somewhat near you, and kind of similar to how having multiple trains on this ride adds to the off-ride viewing experience, it also adds to the on-ride experience because there's almost always another train running somewhat near you, so it's super cool to see those trains flying by as well. And it makes this ride fun, even though this ride doesn't have the best forces. So after that long turn, you head into arguably the most exciting part of the ride. Definitely a huge draw for this coaster, since this is the only ride at the entire resort that has an inversion, the vertical loop. Now, it's not the best vertical loop, it's not forceful, you don't get any hang time, but it is fun to break up sort of the monotony of drop, turn, drop, straight track. So it's nice to have a little loop in there. And you can also argue that this is the focal point of the ride itself from an off-ride perspective, so it's not fantastic, but I really like having it on there. Coming out of the loop, you head into what is by far my favorite tunnel. And as I mentioned earlier, the tunnels are better at night, and this is no exception. This looks fantastic at night because since it's dark, the lights in the tunnel really come through. But you can kind of tell too that since this POV was filmed during the day, towards the beginning and ends of the tunnel, the lights really don't have as much of an impact as they would in the nighttime. And then so after passing Jack's fire thingy, you have Violet doing some violet-y thingy. I don't know, man. But hey, I really like the lighting in it, and flying through it at night is top-notch for sure. So Violet's head's just kind of like dangling down at you, which is cool. It creates kind of a near miss. It's fun. After going through that whole section, which might I add also, again, gives pretty decent airtime in the back, you enter into, you guessed it, more turning. So after you do a huge U-turn, a little bit of an S-bend, you go into more straight tracks and brakes. And we head into one of my favorite parts of the ride from a forces perspective, what a lot of people like to refer to as Jack on a stick. This section consists of some small bunny hills that allow for fantastic floater airtime, especially if the ride is running fast. You can also kind of see the airtime in Drew's little drawstring sweater thingies. But it's also probably the most underwhelmingly themed section of the ride, where you just have multiple different Jack figurines just sitting on a stick. While the theming in all of the tunnels I think works out really well, I think this area is a little bit of a miss, although it still really doesn't bother me. It is kind of funny. So despite the kind of weird theming in this area, I still think it's really fun to get floater airtime back to back to back. So after that, the ride is finally almost over, but you dip down into another really fun part of the ride, where yes, you are still just doing turns, but it's all within the structure of the ride. I really like flying through all those beams. It makes the ride feel so much faster, and you have a lot of great near misses. And it makes otherwise boring turns feel a lot more exciting. But after you pull out of that section, you hit the final brake run. You make one last turn around some theming where Jack is giant for some reason. And that does it for the layout. Now, this is not surprisingly a relatively forceless ride. I mean, the launch isn't that forceful. The airtime hills are mostly just floater. The positives are nothing special and are probably the strongest on the loop, where even there they're not that strong. But obviously, considering the fact that this coaster was designed for families to enjoy, I think it really hits the mark. And I think there is still enough in there for a coaster enthusiast or someone that is into more intense rides can still enjoy, like those floater hills, some of the taller drops, drops, and a lot of the near misses as well. Now the trains on this ride, as you can obviously tell, have over-the-shoulder restraints, but there's not really any point in the layout where those detract from the ride experience. I think since it's a more tame ride experience, there's not a whole bunch of laterals or fast-paced transitions, so there's not really any instances where you have an opportunity really to hit your head. Now as far as where you should sit to get the best experience possible for this, I'd say if you particularly like airtime in the back of coasters, then well, you should sit in the back. But overall, I definitely think the best experience is in the front. In the front, you get those fantastic visuals, and also in the front, you get some good pops of airtime hitting the tops of those hills. So I think front is definitely where it's at, and particularly at night. I mean, this thing just looks so good at night. I know I've already said that a few times, but it's so true. It even looks great off-ride, but even more so in those tunnels. And it's just elevated to a different level at night. Alrighty, and now it's time for that good old-fashioned pros and cons list. And aside from this thing not being particularly forceful, I think everything else about it is a pro. As I mentioned, I think it looks great in the area, and it looks great on the ride as well. So overall, really great visuals. Obviously, it's Disney, so fantastic operations. The length of the ride is definitely a huge pro. And like I said, even though the forces are nothing special, they still contribute to a fun ride experience. Now, as far as some of the cons go, I mean, it's hard to find cons, honestly. I think it doesn't do all the good things better than any other coaster, but it also doesn't really do anything that poorly. I'd say if you want to be nitpicky and compare it to other Disney attractions, sure, the theming might not be up to par to those, but if you're just looking at it as an individual coaster, it's pretty hard to find something that stands out as a negative. If I had to say a single con, it would be that it could be more thrilling, but that's just being incredibly nitpicky. But now I'm going to go ahead and rank this coaster, and I think it'd be kind of unfair to give it anything less than an 8 out of 10. I always find this to be a super fun and enjoyable ride experience. The length really makes me feel like I'm not missing out on anything, and getting front row night rides on this really puts a smile on my face. Now, out of the 208 other coasters that I've been on, where does this one rank? Well, Incredicoaster's sitting pretty at 52. It is by no means the best coaster I've ever been on, but with that being said, it is very, very far from the worst. Compared to the other coasters that I've ranked so far, it lands right between SLC's and Superman Ride of Steel, with Incredicoaster obviously being significantly more comfortable than SLC's, and Superman just being more thrilling overall. And if you guys want to check out the full updated list of all the coasters that I've ranked so far, feel free to check out the link in the description to this spreadsheet. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. Go ahead and comment what you guys think of Incredicoaster. Do you find it to be boring? Do you think the theming is lame? Or do you think it's just a well-rounded family thrill coaster like I do? Go ahead and give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Of course, 2 thumbs down if you didn't like it. Go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. Share the video if you're feeling extra fancy. And make sure to tune in next time where I'll be talking about... But I haven't been on Lightning Rod. What's the matter with this thing? Oh, Lightning Run. Okay. I forgot what my own face looks like.